Welcome, everybody. Got a great lineup today. Very excited. Take about one more minute here, and then since every minute counts, we'll get started and let people come in as we make introductions to today. I am Helen Damon Moore, and I'm the Associate Director at the Stain Center for Community-Based Service Learning, just around the corner from the ABCD Institute. So it's my pleasure to welcome you today to our fourth of four ABCD stories in higher education. The first three presentations have yielded really rich insights and are available any minute now on the ABCD website. So you can check those out if you haven't been able to be here for the first three. Our agenda today will be to introduce ourselves to one another and the topic of the day, which is community-based research in higher education in small groups. And I should note that we will be recording the session. Then we will hear from Professor Lynn Worley and her colleagues from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, who will be sharing their insights on using assets and network mapping to strengthen community organizations. We will then reconvene in our small groups to apply our learning today to our own work. So with Kim's help, we're going to break into small groups to introduce ourselves and to discuss these opening questions. And if somebody could jot down these questions, if you could jot these questions down, we don't have the capacity to show them in the chat, but they're pretty easy questions. So your name, your location, your organization or background, what drew you to this session today, and then what does it mean to you to work collaboratively on research with a local community organization? And what are the benefits for research or teaching? And what are the benefits for the community?
Okay, so we're going off to breakout rooms and we'll see you in a bit.
Welcome back. Thank you. I hope you had a bit of time to get to know each other in your groups and to talk about our questions about research and interfacing. I think just from my group, I think we have a blend of community folks and university folks who are all the same folks. So sharing our perspectives in our larger group will be very interesting, I think. But first, we have the benefit of hearing from Professor Lynn Worley and her colleagues from, as I said, the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee on using assets and network mapping to strengthen community organizations. And we will hold our thoughts from our opening group and share them as are relevant after we hear from Lynn and her students. So thank you so much for joining us. I will let them introduce themselves as they go along for the sake of efficiency, but let me extend a warm welcome to them from the ABCD Higher Education Series. We're really excited to have them here. So take it away.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting us. We're really glad to be here. And I will mention that when I'm sharing my screen with the slides, in order not to block those for you, I'm on a one small screen. It's a little bit hard for me to see what's going on with the rest of folks, but feel free to, you know, I'm pretty laid back about presentations. Feel free to speak up if you have a need. So if you can't see something or you can't find something, feel free to just let us know. So we really appreciate this opportunity to be here. My name is Lynn Worley. I'm on the faculty of the College of Nursing at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. And in that capacity, I am director of a master's program in sustainable peace building. I also coordinate an undergraduate degree in peace and conflict studies. And as such, often people wonder what peace building is doing in nursing, and that could take another whole session, but I just want to say that our program is really focused on teaching about systems thinking, about the sustainability of peace building work and community change and community development. And that's something that we found that people who are in nursing really understand. They see people that they work with in the large system, social ecological context. And so we have a lot of great master's students. You're going to get the chance to meet a couple of them today. They're been working with me this year on this research project that we're going to talk about. I will briefly mention that the research that we're talking about today is still in process. It is funded by a grant, an Ignite grant from the university system in Wisconsin. So the state of Wisconsin, and we've had a year-long grant to dig into some work with a community organization that I have had over 15 years of work and relationship with in the city of Milwaukee. We're going to do our best because, of course, there's all these, we want to protect people's privacy and sometimes names are there, so you won't be able to see some kinds of details, but you'll be able to see others. And hopefully by the end of this presentation, you'll have a lot to talk about in your chat rooms. We will be taking the slides kind of up and down because we have two technology tools that we've been using this year that we want to very briefly share with you so that you can see how we're doing some of this work both in person and electronically. So with me today is also Olamilekan Awani, and his name that we often call him by is Lekan. He's made it easy on us. And then Christian Trenley. Lekan is a first year in our graduate program, and Christian is just about to graduate, just about finished up his second year. So I'm going to just talk briefly about the objectives of the project. We wrote this grant collaboratively with the organization, the Wellness Center Commons that had opened up really during COVID. There was an early, we call phase 1 and phase 2, and phase 1 has been around for about 7 or 8 years, so it had established itself well, but phase 2 was a large jump forward and included adding another 7 organizations to what we might call a multi-service, except that it's not just nonprofits because there's also some small businesses involved. But what the Wellness Commons was about is, sorry, distracted by all the tools. Wellness Commons is bringing into the neighborhood that has had a lot of social and economic challenges over several decades, mostly due to historical racism and hypersegregation in the Milwaukee region, as well as the decision to try to build a highway that later was blocked. It gutted the neighborhood that this organization worked in, and it's been about 20 years now of the organization working to bring the neighborhood back to a really fantastic place. And in fact, now they're trying to look forward about how they're going to use their tools to make sure that they don't get regentrified right out of their neighborhood. So the goals this year have been to strengthen and uplift the innovation in Wellness Commons. And they see health along the lines of both the community and the individual, and they also combine with health the concept of wealth. So they talk about their work on health and wealth. Secondly, it's been to deepen the understanding of the opportunities to gather insight about the model that they're using. And as part of the grant, one of the deliverables is to develop by the end of August what we might call kind of a blueprint of what they're doing, what we've learned this year from what they're doing, and how other neighborhood organizations may want to come up with their own version of this kind of wellness commons. And my third goal with the grant was to develop and train graduate student researchers, particularly around community-based research and how they could be part of learning to work with community organizations. So, just waiting for my slide. I tried in a different way. Okay, so I won't spend real long on this. This might be kind of familiar to most of you, but maybe not. So in assets-based research, we are starting our work with thinking about appreciative inquiry, what is going well, relationships that we build, as well as always asking what is working, and understanding successes is also a way to understand where there might be some barriers. What do you bring to the table? Then what we did as we did some interviews, we'll talk a little bit more about our methods in a moment. We can build a mapping of our assets that we heard people talking about. We helped them to identify what they have going on with 10 organizations involved in this Wellness Commons, and all relatively new to each other, just getting to know each other. Some still partly virtual, some in the building and in person. This has been a really important time for this project to happen. From looking at the assets that we learned about from the participants, then we started to try to help them build some insight. That's what we've been working on for the last month or 2 months. And the next stage in our process is we've been doing a little bit of mobilizing and meetings, but we're going to be turning now for the next couple of months of the project to really mobilizing the collaboration among some major themes that have come out. And then building towards some strategic planning with them around actions that they might take going forward. And I'm going to turn it over to Christian.
All right, hi. So yeah, this is Christian speaking, and as Lynn touched on a little bit, yeah, our project methodology. So how are we conducting this work, which oftentimes sort of feels a little theoretical, but we did break it down into some steps that we could follow. So for us, it began with convening our stakeholders individually through interviews. And a lot of the steps that we follow a lot of the steps you might follow if you were doing a more complex like conflict resolution or facilitation plan, and also blending in some research there. So yeah, we started with interviews. This allowed us to learn about our participants and for them to learn about us, for us to identify the stakeholders and learn more about their work through conversation and relationship building. The next step that we took was the focus groups. And here we used organizational learning tools. For example, the iceberg model was something that we used. And this allowed participants to gather together and see and share deeper layers of information around like their cultures, their like work cultures and personal cultures, their relationships, and then their different experiences, both inside and outside of the Innovation and Wellness Commons. We then moved into a research open house, which was a chance for our stakeholders to see and learn about each other even more by reviewing and adding information that we'd already gathered to create their asset and network maps. So it was an all-day affair where people could come and go. We had some tea from one of the small businesses there to chat, and then to continue learning about our progress and how we were continuing to conduct our work on this project. We next looked at coordinating stakeholders into themes, as Lynn was mentioning, around their different goals and their interests and some of their fields of work in order to continue to boost collaboration, and then move into strategic planning to help systematize some of these shared goals that might grow out of the themed collaboration meetings. So for example, the stakeholders in the IWC, which is what we call it, have expressed a desire for stronger communication and outreach materials like calendars and emergency preparedness plans, as well as shared grants that focus on the different levels and the different fields of the IWC's work. And it's our hope that as we continue to convene them and their information and their ideas, that we can help to continue to facilitate a strong plan for how they can continue to approach this work. And then we also, as I've sort of mentioned throughout this, we use different tools like listening and our facilitation skills, analysis of the different data and the evaluation of the dynamics that are happening, as well as brainstorming and then mapping, which we'll talk about now. Lynn, you could go to the next one. So this is an example of a network map. Well, it's actually our network map. In just a minute, we're going to unshare the slides and move to Kumu, which is the mapping software that we use to develop this. But first, I mean, I think it's important to ask, like, what is this tool and how are we using it? So a network map, if you've never heard of it before, displays names of people and groups and organizations, as you can see by the dots. And then their lines between them are the connections or relationships that sort of situate them within a wider social system. They often look pretty complex, but they can be organized in dozens of different ways to communicate different layers of data and information. So for example, our map could be used, which we'll share in just a second. Our map could be used to identify leadership potential based on who is well connected to different organizations and people and in what ways. It can also be used to see how information and messages and even resources are moving between different organizations and different people. And then, like I mentioned at first, it also just gives you a stronger sense of how these organizations sort of fit together in an ecosystem of people who are, moving between organizations and doing partnerships and, competing for funding even sometimes. And it helps you get a stronger sense of this system. It's called Kumu. We use a system called Kumu. I'll show it to you, Lynn. You can unshare and I'll share my screen.
Yes, so we'll be coming back to the PowerPoint, but we're going to move over to Kumu at this point.
And I'm just going to do a quick tour of our little systems map here. So hopefully everybody can see what I'm seeing, right?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So yeah, this is our systems map, maybe, or our network map. Maybe the first thing that you might notice about it are these focal points, which are sort of situated around our map. They kind of resemble a spider web. And these focal points are the 11 different organizations that we've identified as our key stakeholder organizations. And they sort of circle the rest of all of the information that we've found. The other thing that you might notice is that we have a legend here depicting organizations as orange and people as blue. Those colors are kind of arbitrary. There's nothing really symbolic there. But you can see we do have like the different colors that depict the different people in the map in the different organizations. And then the other thing that you'll notice is that apart from our organizations, which circle the outside, we've got all these different organizations and people on the inside. And these are organizations and people that our stakeholders have identified as being related to in a number of ways, either through a history of collaboration or the development of a new partnership, or a coworker who used to work at one place, but now they work at a different place. And the other thing that you'll notice, the last thing I'll point out, is that some of them are sort of floating off on their own closer to what I guess you could call their home organization. And this is because they maybe don't have a specific relationship with anybody else in the map. But as you move closer towards the center, you'll see that some of our organizations are more highly connected than others. So yeah, as you move sort of closer into the circle, you'll see higher levels of interconnection and collaboration between the different stakeholders and then the wider ecosystem of other organizations that we're working with. And I'm just going to look and see. Yeah, this is just one way that we've organized our map. It's actually just an iteration of it. We didn't start with this. It's gotten here over time. But it may change again based on feedback from our stakeholders, and yeah, it just keeps going from there. And I think I'll stop sharing, and then Lynn, if you want to take over again.
Yes, and I'll just mention in that open house that we held, we had a large printouts of this map, so that, and small for each organization, so that the organization members, as they came through, could write on the map, add to it, give us feedback, clarify how they felt we had done with developing this depiction of networks of people. We're going to just now briefly talk about our next piece, which I will turn over to Lei Khan. He's going to introduce the concept of our assets mapping. And then he's going to take us out into Mural briefly to show you how we've been doing that.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Lekon. And so I will be talking about the asset maps. And these are built from interviews, focus groups, icebergs, and also internet searches that we did during our research. And we keyed in questions such as who the key partners are, what the projects or programs are central to the organization. Then we asked about the organization structures and why they are part of the wellness common. And I would like Lynn to please unshare the screen so that I can share a mural from my hand. Thank you. So this software is called Mira, and what you can see up there is the legend, which represents the 11 organizations that we're dealing with, which is the 10 nonprofits in the IWC and also Walnut Way itself. So we try to bring out the asset from the interviews and the icebergs and the focus group meeting that we had. And what we derive from there are their sources of funding. And if you look closely here, you will see the Zilber family, social entrepreneurship, and others as a part of funding. And we pulled out the programs that they do too. We laid out each organization according to the programs that they do. And here we have the value and the mission and the history of the organizations in the Wellness Common, and as well as the collaboration and growth opportunities. If you look closely here, for these two organizations, they already have something in common, even while we are pulling out their assets. And we showing these out makes them to realize what they have in common. I mean, the intersections in their assets. Also, we map the products that they each produce in the organizations. Also, another thing we did was mapping the individual assets. I mean, the individuals in the organization are the representative of the organization. So we mapped out their skills, their backgrounds, and as well as their values, and also their expertise. So having done that, we came to a conclusion about the opportunities for collaborations. And these are the 4 themes that we came up with from the assets, which are health and wellness, employment and wealth, then food and environment, youth development. And we try to list all the opportunities that are available for collaborations for this organization. Just like Christian said, these information can be subjected to change anytime, depending on feedbacks and the contributions from each organization. Yeah, I will stop to share my screen now. You can move on to the next slide.
Okay, yes. So we just have a couple more slides to share as we finish up. Let me just get this. Lei Khan, I think you have one more that you were going to talk about.
Yeah. So this is a kind of picture to show us the processes that are involved in the mural that we created. So we first of all did like an in-person activities, posting out all of these assets after we put them out from the organizations and before trying to map them. So these are the focus areas that I just discussed in the last slide, and the insights for collaboration. So yeah, thank you.
Great. So just finishing up, I mentioned where we're headed. Of course, just because the funding ends in August doesn't mean we're done. In fact, we're exploring some possible opportunities of what is next. In particular, though, we are really trying to encourage and have been having a lot of conversations about how these 10 organizations begin taking these collaboration spaces. So we'll be having in the next few months a meeting around each of the topics, and organizations will self-select about which ones they want to come to. Probably one of the big insights we've had, which will be no surprise to any of you folks, is that when you do a big multi-service collaboration like this, finding just even 30 minutes to meet with everybody is near to impossible. That's how the brainstorm of the research open house happened. It was out of need that we kind of came up with this idea that, oh, we should just have a long time and people can come through when they can. So we are working over the next few months in sorting out how to strengthen those cross-organization relationships. Sometimes that's between two organizations because of a common interest, or between perhaps 4 or 5. We are also going to be moving in with them and they're determining what this would look like, strategic planning. They've had some suggestions about, when we might be able to do meetings. And, there's an idea of starting going forward, perhaps quarterly meetings would be doable for people within the IWC. As Christian mentioned, there's a particular need as a new organization that came onto, or a new larger structure that came onto into the world really during COVID, communication patterns. And in fact, there's some field work that Christian will be doing this summer to help them come up with some comm plans for each other. And so every meeting is going to be a little bit about the sort of real basic needs. So you think about like the hierarchy of needs, real basic needs that organizations have in order to collaborate, and then the big ideas. And that's another insight we've had this year, that you can't just like run right into what are the big ideas that you want to move forward on. The basic needs also have to be met, and where can they share services and ideas and resources and get to know each other a little bit better. And then building the identity of this Innovation Wellness Commons. And their internal identity has been a lot of the work this year, but they're also expressing a real desire to build their external identity. And that's part of the planning going forward too, is all the individual organizations have relationships with the neighborhood and with the whole city, but now how do they do that as a single entity as well? And then deepening the assets knowledge across the organizations. And they've all come to see these and they look at these charts. They say, wow, I didn't know you were working on this. Let's sit down over here and talk a little bit more about what we could do together. Building trust among the organizations. As Lekhan mentioned, many of them are funded. Sometimes they might even be interested in similar grants. So figuring out how to navigate that, build the trust. And oftentimes now it's actually easier to get some grants when you have collaborations and they have that now built into their structures. And then building the sense of interdependence. Looking not just to the partners that Christian showed so effectively with the map that are external, but also looking to those internal partnerships. And so to close out on our last slide, we're just going to briefly mention some of these important points about why an assets approach matters, at least in our project. These organizations are very diverse. We didn't get a chance in this to say a whole lot, but let's just say that some of them have 1 or 2 employees and are serving sort of personal, psychological, and nutritional needs of community people. Others have hundreds of employees and have been around for 80 years in the city and this is just one of their many locations in the city. And so really trying to figure out how to balance a collaborative structure within the diversity and seeing all the strength of the size and also the diversity of focus of the organizations. And yet a lot of ahas from all of us, the collaboration with the organizations about the places that they really find themselves crossing over and the excitement that comes from that. We're also looking at this as perhaps a model. It wasn't our idea to put the IWC together, but we really want to support this way of not seeing, of addressing the silo culture of community development, individual nonprofits all trying to do their piece separately. Here, they not only will share physical space, but we're also trying to help them to build how to share identity space. And then the issues they work on are very intense. These are exhausting. They work on things like food, trafficking of people, particularly of women, unemployment, climate crisis impact. They do things like hand out gun locks on certain days. They have safe houses. They, are making hundreds of meals a day that are delivered to area schools. They're teaching people with intellectual disabilities who have employment barriers because they've served time in prison. All these are really intense. And so to then be able to have the time to come and work with each other and find these interconnections is pretty demanding. And so this level of collaboration is super important, is super exciting, but we're also really tracking through with this community-based development and assets and appreciative inquiry of the idea of taking it one day at a time. You don't have to figure this all out right now. You don't have to have the perfect collaboration, but what's a space that gives you some excitement? And then we're also just finally, our last point is this whole idea that what assets-based thinking does for us is to build collaboration on what they have, not what they lack. They will find over time as they work together that there are ways in which they may be able to fill each other's needs and potential gaps. But we're really talking about thinking in ways that assets can bring them together and bring their excitement. So that's what we have for you today, and thanks for the opportunity.
Bravo. Thank you so much, Lynn. And your colleagues. We're really inspired by all the work and amazing work. And so are there questions, comments that arose from the presentation? You can put those in the chat or raise your hand. We have a lot of people, so raising your hand is great, but we do want some interaction around this amazing work that's happening in Milwaukee. Questions or comments, observations? Jenny says, bravo.
A couple of people asked about the slides. So yes, I did create a PDF of it, and Kim will be sending that out to folks who are here. I'm not sure you want to do this, Jennifer. Do you want to?
Sure. Thank you so much. It's so interesting. I'm Jennifer Hirsch from Georgia Tech and the ABCD Institute. And I was wondering, I don't know if I missed this and you said it at the beginning, but I was wondering, you were saying that the Commons was not your idea. I'm wondering who kind of requested the Commons or who kind of got this whole thing started. If you can maybe say more about that origin story.
Sure. Be glad to do that. So the group that birthed and created the Commons is called Walnut Way Conservation Corps. They are doing a lot of work on wellness and wealth, as well as they started actually really trying to reclaim this neighborhood through, first it was urban agriculture. They are well known for their peach crop that comes out and gets sold before it's even picked, growing right in the city of Milwaukee. And they have a number of social enterprises, including a landscaping company that employs people from the neighborhood. And the vision about 10 years ago was to move to this idea of rehabbing some of the buildings. They have a house that is where their main offices are. They wanted to rehab some of the buildings on the nearby commercial street and turn them into a space that would have a couple of functions. One would be to bring some of these different services together around the idea of health and wealth. And the second was to really create the innovation language in their name, Wellness and Innovation Commons, is because they've been a long time creator and supporter of the growing of Black-owned businesses. And a number have started in their various spaces and then gone out into other spaces in the city. And with this new building, they now are able to create some more long-term permanent spaces for some of the organizations that are their tenants, which make up the Innovation and Wellness Commons. So thanks for asking that. There's all these things like, what do we include in this presentation? But yes, they are a really well-established and very well known within our city nonprofit that has also reached into the social enterprise world. So they've invited into this building a mix of nonprofits and entrepreneurs.
So did they then ask you to do this research?
So we developed, I last year wrote the grant in collaboration with the executive director of Walnut Way, yes.
Great, thank you so much.
And they have been, they were the ones who asked the first step for an assets map. They've been using that approach for a number of years with some of their other projects. And what we were able to do was really provide the capacity to do it for the Wellness Commons.
Thank you so much.
Other questions or comments? I certainly thought that connection between the coalitions that were represented in my small group and such university resources could be really beneficial. And I think it's a really rich collaboration. And I think grant writing isn't easy. And so there's a great recording about asset-based grant writing available at the ABCD website for people who are interested in that. Other questions or comments, way to connect what we talked about in the small groups at the beginning?
There was a methodology question about how we did our research. So the interviews were almost all done on Zoom, but some of them were able to be done in person. All of them were recorded and then transcribed. We also had focus groups, and Christian mentioned that we use this tool from we use the Water Center strategy of using this thing called Iceberg, but we took it to organizations. Again, something we couldn't fit into our talk, but we did those in person, although because of people's health and also the high technology that the Innovation Wellness Commons has in their conference room that we used, we were able to bring a couple people in as hybrid for that. And so we had a tool that they wrote on, and we did 2 of those because not everybody could schedule at the same time. So it was a mix. We did a little bit of hybrid. We did some in person, and then our open house was completely in person, and we're planning a second one of those for people who couldn't make it.
I think that's brilliant, just given how hard it is to schedule. Did you have something, Howard?
Yeah, so thanks so much, Lynn. This is Howard Rosing at DePaul in Chicago. I actually had the pleasure of touring Walnut Way with students a couple of times back when Growing Power was still active in Milwaukee. They hosted a tour of the spaces, the growing spaces, the orchard, and so forth. And wow, I mean, it was an amazing opportunity to learn how to engage with communities that are building their assets and pushing against powers within the municipal government to get resources and so forth, and really claiming ownership over space, over place, in a really creative way. And I guess as a selfish question, being in Chicago, it was an amazing opportunity for both students and community members that attended with us from Chicago to do that kind of tour. Does that ever happen again? Do you ever work with the community to host those kinds of educational learning sessions to expand the model? I realize, that compensation for those kinds of things is really important. So I say that in all respect.
Yeah, no, I mean, well, I will say that since, and I did work with Growing Power, that's how I met Walnut Way people and got to work with them. So kudos for bringing folks here. I will say Walnut Way is on a citywide eco tour, self-tour. So you can actually come up anytime. It won't be quite the same, but they also, I think as they're coming out of COVID, they'll be doing some additional projects as well. But I just want to, say that, yeah, it's been hard the last couple of years. But most of the organizations that you probably saw are still doing, they're coming back and they're doing some in person. I don't know if that really answers it. Maybe I'll get to it at some point. I hosted a big conference last fall on health equity. We were not able to do the tours that I wanted to do as part of that, just because getting everybody on a bus was still something that our university was, and the organizations were not really able to manage, but absolutely. And if you do get up to Walnut Way, they do have this walking tour. They've come a long ways. They're doing some amazing work around land trusts and neighborhood, like I said, sort of pushing back of course, the Bucks were great and they have this beautiful stadium, but they're only 2 miles away. So now everyone wants to live in that neighborhood. So just really developing how to keep that neighborhood. It's Black-owned businesses and some of the people who've lived there for years that they get to keep their houses. Really important point that you're raising. And so, yeah, feel free if you all are in Milwaukee. Look me up. I'll be glad to connect you up and see what we can do to get you over there.
Thank you so much.
Cool. Well, let's take 10 minutes or so to gather in our last small groups for the day, and to then we'll come back together for a very brief send-off, but to utilize this opportunity to talk with one another about how we might use one of the wonderful tools that we've heard about our relationships between our university and our community, whatever has inspired us. So the questions are, in what ways does the story shared make you think about your institutional work differently? What are some of the ways your imagination has been inspired? So Jenny, did you have your hand up? No, okay, still there from earlier. So we wish adieu to those who have to go, but we are booked until the half hour. So we hope that you can take this time again to share and share thoughts and a little bit of imagining the future. And Lynn and her colleagues will be part of groups, I think, so you can, those of you in those groups can get direct from the experts, their views, and we can all share and take about 10 minutes and then come back and then we'll adjourn from there. So Kim, can you put us in groups of 3?
I'm going to move you. You may end up in a group that you were in before, or you may end up, I may have had to move you just because people are dropping off, but some people. So also to note, slide 24 has the questions, and below that, place for your responses. Okay, I'm sending y'all off.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Thank you for being with us today, and thank you so much to Lynn. Upshots from that session for folks. A couple of ideas that came out.
Feel free to add them in the chat too as well.
Yes.
Just shout them out.
I was interested, Lynn, in how long a project this has been, and how you anticipate that it will continue. Just knowing how segmented we can be in higher education and how the community starts and goes on, and just how that has looked for you.
So the relationship with the organization has, for me personally, it's been about 15 years. A number of different projects, mostly volunteering and getting my students to volunteer, and then in the last couple of years, collaboratively developing grants to support their work. The project itself this year, the funding for this project started in July. It was a very slow pickup for us in the fall. Everything bringing research online and getting a hang of who was who in the Wellness Commons, and them getting a hang of each other. It really started to fire up probably, I'd say in December, early January. And we have a little bit more time, but we're not going to walk away at the end. It's a project that will keep going. We'll continue to look for ways to support this and build their capacity. whether that means I have a grant or a class project or am volunteering some time. It's to me the health and wellness model and community development that really rises from the roots, the grassroots of the community is super important, and I'm there to support it.
Wonderful. Great. Others?
I would say Katie very briefly mentioned the iceberg model in the chat. It's something we didn't have a chance to show, but if you're looking for some really great tools, you can go to the Waters Center on Systems Thinking. That's like Waters with an S. And you can sign up for a free account, and then you can access all of their downloadable tools. And one of the ones they have, or you can just draw your own, one of the ones they have is this iceberg model. They also have a lot of instructional videos, but essentially what it does is help people or organizations have conversations about not just who they are on the surface, but what else they are below the surface. And that's a really important way to get some of the assets details out, because it's not just what is on their front door, but it's all the things that they do in their work that we were trying to capture. Thanks, Anastasia, a graduate of our program, who's posted the details on the Waters Center.
And we especially appreciated in our group the sticky note slide that just showed that this doesn't come about full blown beautifully, as your slides are beautiful and really amazing. And it's nice to know that maybe we can do sticky notes on the way. And also the scheduling of the open house seems really brilliant to me, knowing what schedules are like for both university folks and community folks. Well, on that note, I think we should say that we have had a wonderfully rich presentation and with lots of tools and ideas introduced, and we really appreciate your time today, everyone who's participated, and especially to our presenters. And I want to forecast that on May 17th, just 1 month from today, we have Dara Prusensky, a social work grad student from the University of Pittsburgh, will be presenting on fiscal sponsorship and racial equity. So another really interesting topic from an asset-based community development perspective. So anything else I should share, Kim, or anybody else from the ABCD Higher Ed group?
I would just say that all of these sessions have been hosted by the ABCD Institute working group on higher education. We have a working group that any of you are invited, if you're interested, to join. If you'd like to get more information, you can email me. I'm going to put my email in the chat. It's just khopes@depal.edu. We meet probably bi-monthly. Right now, we're still continuing this series. It'll extend to July. But we'd love to have any of you, if you're interested in joining our group. There is also currently, if you're interested, a training workshop that's going to happen on a ABCD Institute introductory training workshop that'll take place in over 4 sessions in May and June. I'm putting that in the chat as well, if that's something that is of interest to you. And lastly, in case you don't know, the ABCD Institute has a mailing list. We send out information about events like this one, and also a quarterly newsletter. So if you're not signed up to get emails, you can very easily sign up at this last link that I'm providing.
Again, thank you so much, and have a wonderful rest of your day.